In 1970, a young man with a high school diploma and a factory job could buy a house in cash within 5 years of saving. Today, that same job in that same town can barely cover the rent on a one-bedroom apartment. Nothing about the work changed. Everything about the math did. This is the story of how the American dream quietly became unaffordable, told through two men who did everything right in two different decades and ended up in two completely different worlds. His name was Robert, born in 1945 in a small town in Ohio. He came home from the service, married his girlfriend Linda, and took a job at the local steel plant. He did not go to college. He did not have a business plan. He had a lunchbox and a willingness to show up. Robert made about $8,000 a year. It does not sound like much, but listen to what it bought. In 1970, the average American house cost around $23,000. That meant Robert's house cost about 3 times what he earned in a year. He put a small amount down, took a mortgage, and paid it off while raising 3 children on a single income. Linda did not have to work. One paycheck bought a house, a car, food, vacations, and a future. They were not rich. They were ordinary. And ordinary was enough. By the time Robert was 40, he owned his home outright. No mortgage, no rent. The house was his. Now meet his grandson. His name is Mark. Born in 1990, same town in Ohio, same family, same work ethic. But Mark did everything the modern world told him to do. He went to college because everyone said that was the new path to the middle class. He graduated with a degree and with $35,000 in student debt. He found a good job, a real job, paying around $60,000 a year. On paper, Mark earns 7 times what his grandfather earned. So Mark should be 7 times better off, right? Here is where the story turns. That same house, the one Robert bought for $23,000, is now worth around $350,000. Mark earns $60,000. So while his grandfather's house cost 3 years of income, Mark's house costs almost 6 years of income. Double. And that is before a single dollar of interest. Mark does the math one night at his kitchen table. To buy that house, he needs a down payment of $70,000. He has saved $4,000. At his current rate, he will have enough in roughly 19 years. By then, the house will cost even more. He is not lazy. He is not careless. He is running as fast as his grandfather ran. The track just got longer. So what actually changed? Because this is the part nobody explains clearly. The first thing that changed was the money itself. In 1971, the dollar was cut loose from gold. From that moment on, the government could print as much money as it wanted. And it did. Every new dollar made the dollars in your pocket worth a little less. Slowly, quietly, year after year. Your grandfather saved money, and it held its value. You save money, and it leaks value while it sits. The second thing that changed was housing itself. Homes stopped being just places to live. They became investments. Wall Street, big funds, foreign buyers, landlords with dozens of properties, all started buying houses not to live in, but to own and rent back to people like Mark. A house was no longer competing only against other families. It was competing against billion-dollar funds with unlimited cash. The third thing that changed was the wage. Robert's pay rose with the cost of living. Mark's did not. Since the 1970s, the price of houses, college, and healthcare exploded upward, while paychecks crawled. The line for prices went up like a rocket. The line for wages went up like a slow hill. The gap between those two lines is exactly the gap between Robert's life and Mark's. And then there was debt. Robert borrowed once for a house and paid it off. Mark was handed debt before he ever earned a dollar. Student loans at 18, credit cards in college, a car loan to get to work. By the time Mark was ready to buy a home, the bank looked at all that debt and offered him less. The cruel part is that everyone kept giving Mark the old advice. Work hard, get an education, save your money, be responsible. It was good advice in 1970, but the world that advice was built for no longer exists. For years, Mark blamed himself. He thought he was failing at something his grandfather found easy. He felt ashamed at family dinners when his grandfather, with the best of intentions, said, "In my day, we just bought a house and that was that." What Robert never understood was that he had not simply worked harder. He had lived in a different economy. He bought a house in a country where one factory wage could carry a family. Mark was trying to do the same thing in a country where two professional incomes often can't. But Mark's story does not end at that kitchen table. One night, instead of saving for a house he might never afford, Mark did something different. He stopped trying to win his grandfather's game and started playing the one in front of him. He kept renting, cheaply, on purpose. He took the money he would have poured into a down payment and he invested it steadily, every month, into the market and into himself. New skills, a side income, assets that grew while he slept instead of a savings account that shrank. He stopped chasing the house as proof of success. He started chasing freedom instead. 10 years later, here is where the two men stand. Robert's house made him stable. It gave him a home, a family, and security. He did everything right for his time, and his time rewarded him. Mark never bought that $300,000 house, but by refusing to bury himself in a mortgage he couldn't carry, and by investing the difference for a decade, he built something his grandfather never had: money that works without him. Mark is not trapped in one job in one town to make one payment. He is mobile. He is flexible. He owns assets, not just an address. Two men, same blood, same town, same work ethic. One built his life around owning a home. The other built his life around owning his time. Neither of them was wrong. They just played different games because they were handed different rules. And that is the real lesson hiding inside this story. The reason you can't buy a house the way your grandfather did is not that you are weaker, lazier, or worse with money. It is that the game changed, and nobody updated the instructions. Your grandfather's path was simple: one job, one house, one lifetime. That path is mostly gone. But a new path exists, and almost nobody is talking about it. It is harder to see because it does not look like the dream you were promised. There is no white picket fence in the photo. But it leads to the same place that house once did: security, freedom, a life that is yours. So the question is not why you can't buy a house like your grandfather did. The question is whether you are brave enough to stop playing his game and start winning yours. Because the dream was never really about the house. It was about being free. And that, unlike a house in 1970, is still something you can afford to build.